Anyway, so before we begin, I just want to introduce both Mark Quick and Bonnie Sommer. And what we are organizing, all three of us have run for Congress. Mark has family matters and endorsed my candidacy, but ran in the past. And interestingly, as a result of his activism and outspokenness, without running for it, was elected to the Warren County Republican Committee.
He was actually made the chairman of Freeland Heisen.
Yes, and Bonnie was a candidate in the Republican primary side of the ticket. So I'm really glad they're here because, as Mark said, when was it, the night before last? Last night? Anyway, the night before last, I think, we were all at the Sussex County Tea Party meeting, and he made the point very clearly that the three of us, at least, we can't speak for the other candidates, had reasons why we were running for Congress, and those reasons still exist, and therefore we are still fighting to get a certain job done. So anyway, I'm really glad that we're all here together. Now, I wanted to start, and there's a few things we're really going to have to take on if the population is going to shape up and get rid of Obama and get the Glass-Steagall Act in place. And for starters, everyone here, check out your pockets and see how much cash you have. And imagine if, while we were in this meeting, all electronic bank transfers were halted because the euro crashed and the European banking system blew out. You couldn't go to the ATM, you couldn't use a credit card, you couldn't write a check. So whatever you happen to have in cash on you is what you have. Then, on top of that, imagine, because they have agreed, apparently there's desperate clamors from the Exchequer in England and elsewhere that we are doing more quantitative easing, so we can expect hyperinflation. So suppose today is a really good day, and instead of 50 cents, you actually have $23 on you. But the price of gasoline just went to $12 a gallon. Or the price of a loaf of bread is $20. That's what we're looking at. They're already having runs on the banks in various of the European nations. It's a question, which nation will leave the euro first? In Greece, they have elections tomorrow. Is Greece going to go? Is Spain going to go? Is Italy going to go? And what they're saying is if Italy goes, then the whole euro system goes. And as of right now, with no Glass-Steagall in place, the U.S. banking system is tied to the European banking system. So if Europe goes, we go. And what I just said as a scenario could be hitting you and your neighbors before you even think about it. Now, how long do you think under those conditions it would take before you had riots in the streets of this country? What do you think people would do? What do you think would happen when the grocery stores actually ran out of food because they can't get any new shipments without electronic transfers of money? That's what we are looking at. And appropriately enough, today, June 16th, is the 79th anniversary of Franklin Roosevelt's signing of the Glass-Steagall Act into law. 13 years ago, it was repealed. And what you see is the incredible folly of that. J.P. Morgan Chase, as people know, lost at least $2 billion. Well, they're admitting to $2 billion. The actual story, now they're saying $6 or $8 billion. It's probably $30 billion. It's probably $40 billion. A little bit like what happened in Spain, where the government takes over Bankia, and they discover that they're going to need 23 billion euros to bail it out. But then they discover what they actually need is 140 billion, and then they discover it's 375 billion, and then over the weekend it becomes 475 billion. And so what's happening is the amount of money that's required if you want to save the garbage is increasing at a rate faster than our ability even to print the money. And that's what we're looking at. Now, people may have seen, we ran into some people who saw these dreadful hearings where the Senate all drooled over Jamie Dimon and his genius for losing this money. And if you were thinking that maybe some of these senators have been bought off, only 6 of the 22 members of the committee have not received campaign contributions from J.P. Morgan Chase. So Senator Bob Corker, Republican from Tennessee, who said Diamond was one of the best CEOs in the country, has been paid $60,000 for comments like that. Senator Mike Johans, Republican from Nebraska, said your enterprise is big and powerful. You've got a lot of firepower. You're just huge. He's gotten, that's not, I don't think that was a sexual come on, but anyway, he's gotten $147,000 from them. Senator John Tester, a Democrat from Montana, says you guys know the industry. They're calling ripping people off is now called an industry. You know the industry better than anybody sitting up here, and he's gotten set $45,000. And it goes on, and of course what you see is it's not by party. It's both parties, and it's universal, and everybody who got the money can do nothing but slobber on drool on Jamie Dimon on how wonderful he is and how brilliantly he's managed this thing, even though he's losing everybody's money right and left. So we have got to get the Glass-Steagall Act in place, and LaRouche had made a point that we have a situation now where that could occur, which is really twofold. One is that the whole thing is blowing out and it's back on the table and you have more people clamoring for it than ever, but that won't do it. The obstacle is Obama. And Obama right now is in a lot of trouble. He's having what has been called a Watergate moment. So there's really 2 issues that we have to take on, which is his removal, number one, and second, what I wanted to take up is the problem with the American population, because people, frankly, have been very much brainwashed by, I mean, who in their right mind, like this idea that Donald Trump is a genius because he made money, and I think he actually went bankrupt, but that people should have the right to run the country because they made money in an economy that's totally unjust, where you only get rich if there's something criminal to what you're doing. But how many people say that? Oh, he must know something. I mean, he's rich. He must have figured out something. What's wrong with the American population that people have such adulation of money per se and have somehow lost the identity of what the country is about? So that's what I wanted to take up today. Now, one of the problems Obama is having is that he is a malignant narcissist. He is what LaRouche identified in 2009, a failed personality, like Nero, like Hitler. He's obsessed with himself, and he gets high on wreaking destruction on the population. And he's absolutely oblivious to the suffering of any human being on the planet. So he goes to Ohio, where you have, in most of what's now called the Rust Belt, you have unemployment rates of like 50% in some of these old, formerly industrial cities. So he goes there and says that ever since his first 6 months in office, the United States has been on a recovery. So that went over brilliantly. Then people know what he said about how the private sector is doing great, and he had to take that back. So he's made a bunch of blunders, and so some geniuses in his White House, and this also indicates the insanity and his Nero, I mean, just this total kill lust, that people actually thought that it would be good for Obama's campaign to brag to the world how many covert, unconstitutional operations this president has been involved in. And the fact that every Tuesday he has a list, like Nero, up or down, picking who's going to be on his hit list of who he's going to assassinate without due process. I mean, imagine, so that it was called a leak is crazy enough, but what's even more crazy is it's the White House themselves thinking that, saying, I am a dictator and I can kill you and therefore you should vote for me. That this is something that the American people are going to respond favorably to. And of course, in the course of this, they also, before Bob Gates left, and it's widely rumored that he left because of the Libya operation, because we were pretending that we had international support, and basically we did everything in that operation, and he couldn't stomach it, so he was gone. But after Osama bin Laden was killed and the White House wanted to run all over the place and brag about every detail in this, Gates went to the office of Tom Donilon on national security, and Donilon is most likely the person who was bragging about the kill list and everything else, and said, look, I've got a campaign strategy for you, shut the F up. Because when you do this, you jeopardize people that we have who are embedded in these places. And a number of people now, famously like this doctor who supposedly was doing the DNA tracking on Osama bin Laden, he's now in prison in Pakistan. Other people, I'm sure, have been killed. We don't even know the damage. So massive damage to people who were working with us has been done because we're blowing the intelligence all over the place. But it doesn't matter as long as Nero can terrorize people and impress people with his great authority to kill, torture, and maim whoever he wants and get elected in the next election. Now, he also has another problem, because if the euro blows out before November, probably Obama is not going to be reelected. So that's what his people are saying. So in his mind, and this is why you're going to see some of the most raving insanity yet coming up, is that if they can just print enough money to somehow keep this thing going through the summer, to somehow put it together with bubble gum and trillions and quadrillions and squillions of euros and dollars until November, that maybe he can get by. And that's the degree of total delusion and insanity. Because it's very likely, given that you have Greek elections on Sunday, we don't know if the euro is going to exist by Tuesday. That's the reality of the situation. So what LaRouche was stressing today is anybody who says, oh, I'm really confident, I really know what's going on, I really know exactly how to handle this situation, forget it. You're in denial. You're deluded. This is a collapse, orders of magnitude beyond what anyone has ever seen. So anyway, what I wanted to review is this question of economics, the question of the American Revolution, the question of the difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution, for one. Because what happened in the French Revolution was that, among other things, you had a takeover from London. But what happened was the rage of the people was played upon, and the way they did it was by saying so-and-so has too much money, the king and the queen has too much money, this one has too much money, and all you got were these mobs back and forth, a little bit like the American elections. How did Obama get elected? Everyone couldn't stand Cheney and Bush. So everyone said, oh, we're getting something else. They voted for Obama. Then they couldn't stand Obama, so they voted for, Rand Paul or whatever. And then the next election, it's going to be, it's like who has their head in the guillotine one day runs the guillotine the next day. And the French Revolution was a horrible, bloody failure because people's thinking was selfish and small-minded. The American Revolution was a success because it was a conspiracy over centuries, because what became clear to people like Leibniz, among others, and Ben Franklin later, and the Mathers who came over here, and Nicholas of Cusa, and all of these really great thinkers, was that Europe was so stuck in its oligarchical system that you never would be able to have a government in Europe that was based on the idea of nurturing the creativity of the individual. Because you still had kings and queens and dukes and barons, and you were supposed to be whatever your great-great-grandfather was, and somehow it just seemed that no matter what happened, you couldn't break out of that. And if you look at the operas that Mozart was writing at the time of the American Revolution, everything he was doing was a polemic against this oligarchical way of thinking. So they knew that here you had to, the idea of the republic was that a government worthy of what it means to be human. And that's why the Declaration of Independence says that what the inalienable rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is not life, liberty, and property. And it's worth thinking about that, because you might want to ask, what happened to the property of Socrates? Does anyone know where his house is? How about his jewelry? Did he have heirs that he gave it to? How about the property of George Washington? I know he had headquarters out in Morristown. He stayed out there. He stayed other places. But if George Washington had been obsessed with preserving his property and bequeathing it to his descendants, he wouldn't have had time to organize the American Revolution. And he wouldn't have been a threat, so maybe his houses wouldn't have been burned down, but maybe they would have been. So what George Washington left was a nation. What Socrates left was his legacy of a method of thinking, his book, his dialogues, the Republic. And these things cannot be measured with your senses. They don't exist in the physical domain. So the Founding Fathers recognized that for a government to be worthy of human beings, because we are creative, what we contribute is immortal. It's not things, it's not objects, it's ideas, a scientific breakthrough which transforms the standard of living of everybody who comes afterward. Think about the people who worked on indoor plumbing. I mean, we wouldn't have 7 billion people on the planet if no one had come up with indoor plumbing or electricity. So what is it? What was the discovery of the use of electricity? Is that property? It's a principle. It's a universal principle, because we are human beings. We are capable of gaining an insight and transforming nature. And so the Founding Fathers had a very profound understanding of this. They were not part of the environmentalist movement, or their view of the environmentalist movement was man's right to transform the environment. And that is what the United States was designed to protect. Now, there's a huge dispute on this question. And I saw something recently that really made me angry, and that's why I'm talking longer today. Because Americans really have lost this sense, and also because since the assassination of Kennedy in particular, the shutdown of the space program, the fact that we don't have a nuclear-powered economy, and particularly younger people actually don't have a sense of what it looks like to have a productive economy or to have an economy that's driven by scientific discoveries. So people have become a little obsessed with particular objects that they can possess and lost sight of the idea that the mission of our republic and the mission of mankind is to make breakthroughs in science that contribute to our immortality as a species. Now, one person who understood this really, really clearly was Alexander Hamilton. And you can show him. Hamilton, as people know, was George Washington's aide-de-camp. He was born in the West Indies. His mother, he was a bastard. His mother had been married to some nasty guy who was really abusive, and because of the configuration of the islands and the church, she couldn't get out of that marriage, so she took up with Hamilton's father. And what happened was his mother was extremely well educated by her mother, who knew all kinds of languages, Latin, Greek. She was a reader, and so this little boy was getting an enormous education smack in the middle of the British slave trade, sugar trade, and everything else. And what happened was you had a project out of Princeton University, and a Professor Knox, who went down there, I think he was preaching at the church, and he discovered this 14-year-old kid who was writing all these completely brilliant things. I think there was one thing he wrote about a terrible storm coming, and was this a question of justice or not. He was profoundly philosophical at a very early age. So Knox takes this kid and brings him back, gets him over here to the United States, and Hamilton is immediately in the circles of the American Revolution. But even that is a conspiracy. This was not accidental. We were, the people who wanted to create the Republic were extending their scouts, their intelligence into places all over the planet, wherever they could undermine the British Empire. That's what they were doing. And a lot of it, of course, had to be very carefully guarded and very secret, which is why you have so many ridiculous, slanderous attacks on Benjamin Franklin, for example, who people thought was just over there flirting with the women and going to wild parties, when he was actually, hatching conspiracies to finance the American Revolution. But anyway, this is really, really important, because Hamilton now is under attack. He created the whole system of credit, the first national bank. There was a huge controversy because the United States was in a lot of debt after the American Revolution, $42 million worth, which was a lot in 1783. And many people said, well, look, we just had this revolution. Why don't we people will understand. We've just been through a war. We don't have any manufacturing. We can't produce. Why don't we just not pay it? And Hamilton said, no, we can't do that, because what's the authority of our country going to be if we renege on this debt? And then there was falling out among the states. And after we defeated the British, they didn't leave. They stayed here. They were still here. So we had won the war, but they were still here trying to split apart the Union, break apart the states. So then it was a big dispute. Which state has more debt? Oh, that state has more debt. Let's cut them off, and the ones that don't have any debt will do better. So Hamilton said, forget it. This will never work. What we need is a national debt. We're going to consolidate the debt under the federal government. We're going to keep our nation together. And then on top of that, he said there's no way we can pay this unless we generate growth. And the way we're going to generate growth is we're going to have more debt. We're going to add $10 million to this debt. And it's going to be roads, canals, it's going to be internal improvements. And we're going to have a massive increase in the productivity of the American people. And it was completely brilliant and totally successful. We repaid all the debt. And we quickly became the most industrial, developed nation on the planet with the highest standard of living, because he had an insight of how to use credit for the fostering of the principle of human creativity. Now, I wanted to read you, I have this really wonderful, when he was killed, and you'll see why this is so important. This is a book from 1804 that was given to me by Pam Lowry. And it is the collection, it's titled A Collection of the Facts and Documents Relative to the Death of Major General Alexander Hamilton, together with the various orations, sermons, and eulogies that have been published or written on his life and character. So it's from the time, and it has in it all the letters between Hamilton and Burr. It has the letter that Hamilton wrote the night before the duel, where he says explicitly he has no intention of shooting Burr. He's not going to do it, and he hopes that Burr would be moved similarly not to. And there were funerals and memorials and services all over the United States. But this one description in one of the newspapers, I think, really gives the best sense of what it meant to the nation to lose Hamilton and what people actually thought of his character. And this is in a paper called The National Aegis. Death of General Hamilton. The last Southern mails have brought to us a melancholy confirmation of this distressing intelligence. On Wednesday, the 11th, at 8 o'clock in the morning, he received a mortal wound in a duel with Colonel Burr and expired the day following at 2 o'clock. The particulars, so far as they have transpired, will be found under the New York headline, the papers of that city having observed a cautious and gloomy silence on this occasion, it is not in our power to satisfy the curiosity of our readers by detailing all of the dreadful circumstances of this disaster. Enough, however, is developed to awaken the sensibility and to excite the keenest anguish of all those who are disposed to forget the lighter shades of political difference in the overwhelming distresses of their fellow creatures. We notice with pride and satisfaction the arrangements which had been made among all classes of people, among whatever profession or party, in the city which he was an illustrious inhabitant, to render a feeling and unequivocal testimony of esteem for his character, of regret for his death, and respect for his memory. Personal resentment has been soothed, private animosity has been forgotten, and the spirit of party has been lulled to repose by the contemplation of this calamitous event. The patriot, to whatever political sect he may belong, remembers in him the firm, the enlightened, the profound, the inflexible statesman. The soldier looks back with grateful devotion on his revolutionary labors and reveres the intrepid friend and companion of our first and greatest revolutionary hero. The man of letters mourns with milder sorrow the learned philosopher and the accomplished scholar. The admirer of eloquence dwells with rapture on the musical accents of his voice, the beautiful sublimity of his language, and the irresistible force of his persuasion. He who delights in the blandishments of life and finds comfort and consolation in the enjoyments of social intercourse cannot withhold a tear when he calls to his mind the amiable and interesting traits in his character which had won the affection of all who were comprised within the extended circle of his acquaintance. His family, but here remembrance is too painful. Within the narrow compass of 2 years, a wife and a mother has followed to the grave, a son and a husband, both victims to the same cruel and untimely destiny. And he goes on, scenes of such poignant affection will sink deep on the memory and will serve as an awful warning to followers of that treacherous phantom which leads to beguile and seduces to destroy. So they give a description that upon the death of Hamilton, the entire city of New York was totally transformed. That people dropped all their petty grievances, that people dropped all their stupid divisions and were in awe of the extraordinary nature of the character of Alexander Hamilton and what he represented. And again, you had enormous services, funerals, all kinds of things all over the place. So now, what I want to show you is the attack on Hamilton. And we're going to watch this little video, which is a little populist video. And we're going to just watch the beginning of it, and then we're going to watch the key section.
Tell me when to stop.
Okay. This is how they suck you in. All right, that's the beginning. And how many people have been foreclosed upon now? How many? It's like 9 million or 10 or 11 million, and 4 million families have actually been thrown out of their homes. So obviously there's a big audience for this. Now, watch this. All right, can we get the lights back? Okay, so, I mean, there's so many things here that are, but first of all, the idea that Burr was brilliant, and thank God he killed Hamilton. I mean, it really, and let's see, actually I'm going to slightly change the order. Well, yeah, let's go to who was Burr. Do you have that map of New York State? Okay. Burr was a lawyer, and he had a whole bunch of really rich clients. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. And his clients had land here and here. And what Burr was working on was to get those parts of New York to secede from the Union. And what happened was, after Burr killed Hamilton, he was under arrest. He was wanted for murder. So he fled to England. Can you show the picture of him in Bentham? And when he fled to England, he stayed with none other than Jeremy Bentham, the illustrious philosopher and author of such wonderful books as In Defense of Pederasty. And he joined a plot to destroy the United States. Burr was trailed by American spies. He changed his identity, and he re-entered the United States right before the War of 1812 to burn down Washington. So that's Aaron Burr, total British traitor. And he was a mentor of Van Buren and Andrew Jackson. Okay, now let's go back to what Hamilton was actually doing. And I thought this would be very useful. DeWitt Clinton, who was the governor of New York, who built canals and railroads like crazy and was a close personal friend of Hamilton, wrote a letter to the New York legislature way back in 1794, where he says, quote, "The hand of art will change the face of the universe. Mountains, deserts, and oceans will feel its mighty force. It will not then be debated whether hills shall be prostrated, but," now think about this today, if someone said this, "whether the Alps and the Andes shall be leveled, nor whether sterile fields shall be fertilized, but whether the deserts of Africa shall feel the power of cultivation, nor whether rivers shall be joined, but whether the Caspian shall see the Mediterranean and the waves of the Pacific lave the Atlantic." Okay, so forget it. The idea was we go in there, we transform nature, we level mountains, we join the rivers, we irrigate, we green the deserts. That's the mission of mankind. And how do you do that? Well, that's what Hamilton had to set up on his defense of the question of credit and the national bank. So in his first report on public credit, why you need credit, why should the government be able to issue money that is debt, that exigencies are to be expected to occur in the affairs of nations in which there will be a necessity for borrowing, that loans in times of public danger, especially from foreign war, are found an indispensable resource even to the wealthiest of them. Imagine if we hadn't been able to borrow any money during the American Revolution. And in a country which, like this, is possessed of little active wealth, or in other words, little moneyed capital, the necessity for that resource must in such emergencies be proportionably urgent. Okay, the government has to have the ability to issue credit, but it's very specific. He's not talking about bailouts of $29 trillion to J.P. Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs. It's specific for the good of the nation. Next. And this is more in it. To justify, and why? To justify and preserve their confidence, to promote the increasing respectability of the American name. In other words, this is his argument for creating the system where we're repaying this debt. To answer the calls of justice, to restore landed property to its due value, to furnish new resources both to agriculture and commerce, to cement more closely the union of the states, to add to their security against foreign attack, to establish public order on the basis of an upright and liberal policy. These are the great and invaluable ends to be secured by a proper and adequate provision at the present period for the support of public credit. Okay, and he had a big argument. And then this is on the subject of manufacturers, because the other thing that he ran up against was you had the agrarians, you had people who were involved in agriculture, but wanted to keep a certain standard of living that way. They felt threatened by what it would mean if you had really advanced machinery, really advanced technology and industry. And he wrote on the subject of manufacturers, which also makes more clear what he was thinking. What's the purpose of having scientific progress, of having industry? To cherish and stimulate the activity of the human mind by multiplying the objects of enterprise is not among the least considerable of the expedients by which the wealth of a nation may be promoted. even things in themselves not positively advantageous sometimes become so by their tendency to provoke exertion. Or something that seems to be an obstacle forces you to make a breakthrough, forces you to make a discovery. Every new scene which is open to the busy nature of man to rouse and exert itself is the addition of a new energy to the general stock of effort. And this really reminds me of the, the Chinese guy we interviewed, Howard Chang, I think his name is, who was the water expert and did the study on the Three Gorges Dam. And there was this one clip we have of him. He said, science, you have a problem, and you solve the problem. And then you get a new problem, and then you have to solve the new problem, and then you solve the new problem, and then that creates a new problem. And he was just completely thrilled about this whole process, because that is the nature of human beings becoming closer and closer to an understanding of what is true. As mortal, we will not know truth perfectly, but we can become better. Unlike animals, which do the same thing over and over again, we actually can change what we do, learn from our mistakes, and become better. And their idea was that the whole system of economics should be geared toward that. And this also corresponds to, we can skip that. What is the actual way that our biosphere was developed, contrary to these stupid people who say the second law of thermodynamics, that we're just going to all have heat exhaust. The universe is going to freeze. There was a big bang. Oops. It was a big bang, and yeah. Anyway, there was a big bang, and all the planets came out of that, and they're all getting farther and farther apart. And, God made the universe in the beginning, but then he left. And it's all just winding down, and it's going to be frozen, and we're all going to die, and that's the end. And therefore your life is meaningless, so just forget it. That's one hypothesis. But what it turns out is that the universe actually does not function that way. And that's why every scientist who ever did really good scientific research becomes more and more convinced that there must be a creator. Because it's actually going to increasing order. And what this simply indicates is the breakthroughs of species where you had extinctions. The last one here, 65 million years ago, were the dinosaurs, and 80% of all the species on the planet went totally extinct. But you had earlier back there a few little mammals that came into existence. And mammals are not efficient. Mammals have to consume a lot more food than reptiles. A mammal has to consume about 10 times the food per pound that a reptile does, because a mammal regulates its temperature. Reptiles just lie and wait for the sun to heat them up, and then when they get warm, they can go do something. And if they're cold, they don't do anything. And I know the feeling. But anyway, but mammals have to consume enough calories that they actually have the energy to regulate temperature. They have fur. They can move quickly. They're much more advanced. So mammals were actually able to survive the major changes occurring on the planet, whereas the reptiles largely were not. And so what you're seeing is contrary to the mythology of a giant thing winding down and dying, that the actual course of the universe is to become more complex, more developed, more energy dense, and next, that's exactly what human economy is supposed to do. That if we were going to continue at burning wood, you can see here it takes 23.5 tons of wood to produce the same amount of energy as 6.15 tons of coal. So the coal is actually 4 times more efficient. You need 1/4 as much coal as you do wood. And what that also means is that if you go from a wood-burning economy to a coal-burning economy, you can sustain a lot more people. Maybe you can sustain 4 times as many people because you're using much less fuel for the same amount of energy. And interestingly, and Mark probably knows a lot more about this than I do, but it's also, you can get massive increases of yield in terms of food production per given amount of land. So it's not the case with any resource through simple things like fertilizer and water and you know, so it's not the case that we are limited in resources, as they always tell. We're going to run out. We're going to run out. We're overpopulated. Not true. Oil, only 30 barrels of oil gives you the same amount of energy as 23 tons of wood. Uranium for nuclear fission, 1.86 grams. So now you're suddenly orders of magnitude. 2 little grams of uranium give you the same amount of energy as 23 tons of wood. Why don't they want nuclear power? Fusion, once we get to nuclear fusion, it's only 0.5 gram. And then if you get to matter, antimatter, which is the phenomenal thing, because for people who haven't thought it through, E equals mc squared. C is the speed of light. So if you're talking about the energy being released, the mass times the speed of light squared, that is a big number. You don't need a lot of mass to get a huge amount of energy, and there are tantalizing breakthroughs occurring in this direction. So if you get to matter-antimatter reactions, you need 2 1,000ths of a gram of fuel to get the same amount of energy as 23 tons of wood. And the implications for what the planet could sustain, and also what we could do to other planets, and where we could have human beings, and you know, maybe we should have 1 trillion people on the planet right now if we hadn't shut down the space program, if we hadn't done, shut down this work. So at any rate, this was the conception of the people who founded our republic. Not that they all knew at the time that we were going to have nuclear power, but they all knew at the time that our nation, the idea is if you're fostering human creativity, you're going to make it possible for more and more people to be alive with a higher and higher standard of living. And that is the natural course of human economy. What do I have next? Okay, skip them. Okay, so yeah, go back. So what happened to the War of 1812? Yeah. So what happens is Hamilton gets killed by Aaron Burr, and you have a real setback, and you have a real treason operation against the United States, and you have the War of 1812. And for people who don't know, I went to the Fort McHenry Museum, and of course this is the 200-year anniversary. Look at that land area. The War of 1812 was not just about burning down Washington. This is a full-scale British attempt to once again take over the United States. It was a big deal. And we beat them. And Jackson got his fame because he was down in New Orleans, and he actually did lead a victorious battle down there. And I was saying earlier, unfortunately, they didn't have cell phones, so he didn't know the British had surrendered up in Baltimore earlier. But at any rate, so Jackson was a popular figure because he had won a battle, so he was popular. Okay. Now, what happened is that in 1825, John Quincy Adams gets inaugurated. And this was an absolutely phenomenal period of growth. Oh, that's the other thing in that movie that was so fraudulent. So 1836, Jackson succeeds in shutting down the Second National Bank. You know what happened in 1837? Blowout. The whole system crashed. Giant crash. Okay, so it was a total disaster because what Jackson did is he took all the deposits out of the bank and scattered them everywhere. No one knew what was going on. But anyway, so here's John Quincy Adams and just a few of the things. And what he did, the Second National Bank had come into existence a bit before him, but it wasn't doing that much. But when Nicholas Biddle became the head of it, it began investing like crazy in infrastructure and development in the United States. And you had massive, massive increases. Here are some of the things. Canals, roads, the iron industry, they put very strict tariffs on imported iron, so we had a massive flourishing of iron. Railroads, canals, this, in the terms of coal anthracite production, in 1820, we were producing 409 tons of anthracite per year. By 1830, 5 years after he's inaugurated, we were producing 215,000 tons per year. So it was orders of magnitude of increased production. The same thing with iron. We had been producing 20,000 tons of iron in 1820 and 200,000 tons by 1832. So what happened is, with a president committed to internal improvements and a national bank headed by a patriot, and Nicholas Biddle's entire family was involved in the American Revolution and everything else, they drove this thing. They were able to push it through, and the United States became immensely productive. Next, you can just see, I think I have a picture of Biddle. There's Nicholas Biddle. At any rate, so, then what's next? Oh yeah, and this, it's hard to see, that's too bad. This is a map from 1827, I think, which is the Morris Canal. You can see people here, there's Warren County, Sussex County. This canal was one of the main things funded by the Second National Bank among hundreds of projects, which was crucial because it enabled you to get the anthracite coal into what is in Warren County in particular, and Sussex, all these iron furnaces. Yes?
I noticed that part of the canal goes through Bergen County.
Yeah, it looks like it, yes.
Do you know if there are any remnants of it left?
I think so. You can, I think you can see them, but
It goes into the Passaic River, but then down to the Newark Bay.
did you hear Bob? He said it goes into the Passaic River down to Newark Bay.
So I guess if you know, Carlstad.
Yeah. Anyway, so these things were critical, and every single one of these projects was not a little local. That's not how they were thinking. They were thinking the way that DeWitt Clinton said, which is, we're going to level the Alps, we're going to green the deserts, we're going to transform the entire continent. So each of these projects was not seen as a local New Jersey project. This was seen as a design to develop the entire continent. Next. And it was very successful. This is a chart of population growth in the United States from 1700, and I can't even read that. What does that say? 20,000?
20 million.
Really? Did we get 20 million?
No.
Oh, no,
I mean,
it's
that's
way
the
down
top
here,
number.
so it's like, I don't know how many, very few. Maybe 3 or 4 million.
Right.
3 or 4 million up to now over 300 million. And next. This is somewhat interesting because you can see what parts of the United States are the most densely populated. New Jersey, I always like to brag, is the most densely populated state in the Union with 1,200 people per square mile. And if the whole country had that, the nation would have 4.3 billion people in it. But you can see what's wrong with this. We never developed this whole part of the country. We didn't level the Rocky Mountains and, whatever he was talking about. Bring water to the deserts. I mean, it's really, frankly, criminal that 200 and however many years after our founding, and we still have these huge, huge chunks of the country that have not yet been developed. Anyway, so this is really what I wanted. Do I have something else on there? What's on there? No. Oh, there's Jackson. Oh, I wanted to show you one thing. In Jackson's time, people were a little more clear. I couldn't read this writing, the cartoon, but this is a cartoon of the day when Jackson came in and shut down the National Bank and took all the money and scattered it all over the country. So he's the jackass. And then here's all the little, and there's the fox. I don't know, who is that? Van Buren. Oh, yeah, Van Buren. So the fox is coming into the hen house. Oh, the entrance to Franklin Roosevelt's house. Yeah. So at any rate, the people of the time had a sense of what was what was occurring, and sure enough, he comes in, shuts down the National Bank. We have a spectacular crash. The whole system blows out, and then he does his other measures like the Trail of Tears, where he reneges on an agreement made with the Cherokee Indians and marches them off of their land and kills about
It says that the
15,000.
hen is the U.S. is the bank.
Oh, the hen is the bank?
Yeah, and that's the hen's chicks.
Yeah.
He's stomping all over.
Right, and they're all sent to. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say. The rooster with the helmet. I don't. I can't. I don't know. Anyway, I also wanted to tell something interesting about our Second National Bank, if I can find it. Anyway, it's interesting. I can't find it, but the Second National Bank, I think, opened with $35 million in capital, of which $7 million came from the U.S. government, and the rest was various investors and other banks and things. And there were foreign banks involved, but none of the foreign banks had a vote. They were not allowed to vote on the policies of our national bank. So it's worth thinking of what you have now under this Obama administration. What happened a year ago, remember the Super Congress? Standard & Poor's and Moody's, two rating agencies for private billionaires who have they are not elected, they're not interested in representing the people, they don't pretend to. They come in and they say, if you don't cut $4 trillion from your budget, we are going to downgrade your debt. And I remember Rick was pointing out that people get downgraded, like you get your credit card interest rate increased if you make a late payment, or there's some issue that makes you seem like more of a credit risk. The United States has never been late. We've never done anything. We've never missed a payment. We've never created a situation that would justify downgrading our credit. But they come in like dictators to say what the policy of the United States has to be, and then they appoint a super committee of members of the House and Senate who are going to impose vicious austerity on the population. Now, happily, that whole thing fell apart, but this is a takeover. It should be really, really clear that Obama serves the interest of the British Empire. He serves a foreign interest. Between the war policy, the fact that Tony Blair is his main campaign advisor, we just learned 2 days ago that we now have a war in Yemen. Panetta said we're in a state of war. This is another war that was never declared, that never went to the Congress. So he's completely out of control, completely treasonous, but we have a window now both where he can be removed, and because of the crisis and the fact that all of these illegal actions of Obama are under investigation, and people here who are a little bit older than I am. I was alive when Watergate happened, but I don't have a terribly vivid memory of it. But what happened was it wasn't just one thing. It was a whole bunch of things that Nixon did. And then the biggest problem, which really got him into trouble, was trying to cover it up. And that's what Obama did immediately Friday when the story about the leaks came out. He came rushing out and said, it wasn't us, it wasn't the White House, blah, 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 blah. So he is moving exactly along the Watergate trajectory. And what we would like to do as quickly as possible is clinch the deal and get him thrown out of there. So that's what I have. Anyway, so I would like to introduce Bonnie first and then Mark to say a few words about what we're doing and going to do, etc. Go ahead.
Well, one of the
Speak
first
here
things.
so they can hear you.
Oh, okay.
That's not amplification. It's
Well,
recording.
that's okay.
I want you to be in the video.
Hi, it's nice to be here today. One of the things I have to say when Diane was speaking of people and individuals, that is part of what the president's war on this country is. It is to take away everybody's individuality so that you're chained to the federal government for the rest of your life. He doesn't want you to think of anything, create anything, or do anything. And the unfortunate part of it is people see right through that plan. And he thinks he's hiding everything, but he isn't. He is a person who wants to make sure that you know he's smarter than you. He wants to control you in every facet of your life. I, for one, say, not going to happen. He comes out the other day with this huge thing by passing the DREAM Act all by himself, to which 2 years ago or 3 years ago he said he couldn't do that because of the federal immigration laws. And even last year he said it was impossible. He didn't have the authority. But I guess in an election year, things change. And that is what this man's hope and change message was. I hope people don't notice how many times I keep changing my mind, because I'm going to leave them with absolutely nothing. I'm smarter than them. I'm going to get rid of the oil and coal industries, but not by myself. I'm going to use the Environmental Protection Agency to do that dirty work, which he's doing at an alarming rate. He's taking our blessed natural resources that we have in this country, and he is just stepping all over it. He wants his green energy, and that's the way it's going to be, whether it bankrupts this country or not. He doesn't even care whether you have money left, what green energy does. And hopefully he's even thinking, well, maybe the population will even die off and save the planet. But, little hope of that. So this is a man who has very dangerous plans for this country if he is ever reelected, and that's one of the reasons I ran. He's a Marxist. His whole tax the wealthy rhetoric is nothing but Karl Marx's favorite speech, that the wealthy have too much and there's too much social injustice. So I have to take that money and give it to who I want it to, regardless of whose money it is.
Except from Jamie Dimon.
Except from Jamie Dimon, that's right, where Obama's $10 million, at least if not more, is sitting very comfortably in that bank, let me just say, to which he's not redistributing his own wealth. But he doesn't mind taking your money and saying, well, let's see what I could do with your money now. He's just pouring it away, and pardon my French, but flushing it down the toilet. To do with your money whatever he pleases, because why? He doesn't care about the Constitution. His drone attacks are all but in total violation of it. The 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 9th Amendments say, wait, you can't do that. But obviously it doesn't bother him. He has done every possible thing he can think of to destroy from the inside out the very values that make this country what we are today. The Constitution, our sovereignty, the people, our entrepreneurship, and every single thing that we are. He is a 360-degree turn from it. And I ran just to try to tell people, wait, stop. He's not the God you think he is. He doesn't walk on water. He wants to probably get rid of it because his green energy will probably take care of it. So he's probably going to cut down trees and, well, I don't know, put up solar panels like they did in, I think, Moonachie. They took some 5 acres of land, cut down all of that land, and put solar panels up for the greater good of you. Although your energy costs are going to go up, but he even said so. He said, but that's okay, because he'll take care of you. So if one of my basic problems is, and why I ran for Congress in the first place, is to keep putting the same people in office and expecting a different result, I'm sorry to say is never going to happen. Unfortunately, if you're not born with millions of dollars and you can't have TV ads, unfortunately nobody really wants to hear what you have to say. But everyone sitting in this room today knows why we're here, and everybody sees what this man has done in 3 years. He has ripped this country apart from the liberal judges he appoints on the court, his threats of the Supreme Court, which are appalling to me, and everything he wants to do to take the sovereignty and our natural resources and everything God gave this great country, and he just doesn't care. And it doesn't seem to matter to him who suffers as long as he doesn't suffer. And now, thank God, he's no longer blaming Bush, he's blaming Europe and the entire crisis there. So he created something to make people think how interconnected we are, his global economy. The fact is there's no global economy. We could trade with whoever we want, and thank God, and hopefully we will wake up, and once Greece probably is no longer in the Eurozone, hopefully our country is going to be strong enough to survive. But if the International Monetary Fund, to which we are a member of, keeps bailing these countries out, I know this is not a very popular thought, but maybe if they just went totally bankrupt, started from square one, and realized the government can't take care of everybody. You can't retire at age 50. It's just not going to happen. Greece has nothing to fall back on. And maybe if they went bankrupt and everybody stopped giving them money and said, listen, you've got to learn the lesson that socialism does not work. The government can't take care of you from the day you're born till the day you die, and people have to learn something that we all know, responsibility for one's life. Michael Bloomberg, the mayor of New York, says you can't have a 16-ounce soda. Fine, okay, so what's he going to do next? Come into your home and start cleaning out your cabinets and say you can't have this and you can't have that? How far are we going to let the government go before they just say, well, you know something, I don't like the way you pee, and that toothbrush, you can't use it. I mean, what's really next? How far are these people going to go before every single person here says, that's enough. I've had it. November to me can't come soon enough to tell this man in the White House, you're fired, and get him out.
Hopefully we're getting him out well before November. That's the idea.
With some luck.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark. And later you can go on.
For some of you here, I've been introduced before. My name is Mark Queck. I'm a Warren County Republican committeeman. I'm actually the chair for Freelandhuisen. I just was elected here in June during the primary. One of the reasons why me and Diane got to be great friends this year is because we both believe in one thing, and I think Bonnie does also, that we need to have an open and an honest dialogue on real issues that concern each other. I think by the presence of all three of us sit here that there are real issues that will separate out and get rid of the parties and address all of our needs and our concerns. I think that we sit here and we look at each other and you look outside the door here, where are our futures going? Has anybody got an idea where they're going? And that's a problem. Nobody has a vision towards the future anymore. You sit here and we look. I'm going to be a new father in January. I have a 6-year-old at home. Yeah, right on me too. How do you like that? Hey, who hired that train? Not yet. All right, I guess that's going far enough now. Come January, I'm going to be a new father again. My wife is expecting to have a little one come January. I have a 6-year-old at home. I actually honestly got to sit here, and it scares me to think that when my son reaches my age, what are we really going to have? One of the big things I've been out actively fighting, and I'm sure a lot of you people are aware of it, is Agenda 21 and the wholesale slaughter of our country for foreign interests. I've been crusading against that. Diane's aware of it, and so is Bonnie. our government is committing treason on all levels of government, from our local municipalities through our state government, all the way to the White House.
You should say what it is. Not everyone knows what agenda.
How many people here are aware of what Agenda 21 is? Yes. For those that you don't, what Agenda 21 is was the open admittance from the United Nations with the Rio de Janeiro conference in 1992, where they were going to use the green philosophy to co-op and control what was going on with world politics. It's where we keep consciously hearing we use too much gas, we have too much electricity, you have too many wants and needs, you're going to have to start learning to do without. I'm an American, you know what? If I go to work and I got $20 in my pocket and I want to buy a steak, I'm buying a steak. If I want something, I can go out and I can earn it. But, you know, it shouldn't be left up to our interests and our futures to be sold out for foreign interests. I mean, every time you turn around, we've got to lower our value as a people so we can share our wealth around the world. I think if you sit here and look from the end of World War II, where our country sat, what we had in this country. You look at Eisenhower with all the interstate highways. You had Roosevelt during the 40s with all the dam projects and everything else. Since the 60s and Kennedy and the loss of Kennedy, what president has really actually put a forward agenda out there for the American people? It's always been about taking less for yourself and the government getting more. I think that we need more in our pockets, less in theirs, and we're supposed to determine our own futures and not have people determine it for us. I'm sick and tired of sitting here, and we sit here and we look at all the issues that are being used against us, whether it be race, sexuality. You go down the list of issues that they keep us apart by. And I just think it's got to stop. You got to start sitting down, having the conversation. I think me, Diane, and Bonnie going forward here over the next couple of years are going to try to prove a point that even though we each one of us have our own differences, we can come together on a core set of values with the Constitution and just basic respect for people that may send a message to these people and may make a change. I don't know what else to do. I've tried everything I can. And I'm also going to be running for a state office next year, and I don't know what's going to happen. But giving up isn't in my blood. And I hope that you people don't give up either.